Good morning. I'm Mitch Mitchell. I'm Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is 9:05 on May 8th, 2026. I'm going to call to order today's regular meeting of the board. We are meeting in person this morning with commissioners and staff and members of the public in attendance. I see Casey already smiling because she knows she's going to be called up soon.
After the budget.
After the budget. So, we do have a quorum with 4 commissioners present. And video of today's meeting is being streamed live online. The link to watch the meeting is www.sdhc.org. To accommodate additional members of the public who may wish to participate in today's meeting, we have set up an overflow room down the hall. Live streaming of the video of today's meeting will be shown in that overflow room, and speaker slips will be available in the overflow room for those who wish to provide comments to the board today. Our staff will bring those slips to us once they've been submitted. At the appropriate time, staff will escort speakers from the overflow room here to the microphone to speak in person. Members of the public that are here in person in this room may still need to submit a speaker slip. You'll see Susie Kaywood over here on the side. Wave your hand, Susie. She is standing in today to accept those speaker slips. In a moment, I will be proposing that agenda items 101 and 102 be placed on the consent agenda for today's meeting. Members of the public may provide comments about the items on the consent agenda before submitting a speaker slip for that item before the board. To speak in favor of any item, please submit a gold speaker slip. To speak in opposition, please submit a pink speaker slip. And those who wish to address the board on items that are not on the agenda need to submit a white speaker slip. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments about the agenda items or non-agenda public comments. However, if a large number wishes to provide a non-agenda public comment, they will be limited to 1 minute each. Collective testimony by those who support or oppose shall be limited to no more than 15 minutes total per side. So when I call your name, please step up to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin making your comments. Non-agenda public comments, approval for the minutes, commissioner comments, and the report from the president and CEO will be heard at the end of today's meeting because we're going to try and go straight into the budget. So we'll begin with the consent agenda. And as I said at the start of today's meeting, I'm proposing that item 101 and 102 be put on the consent agenda for approval. And we have 1 speaker slip, and this is from Mrs. Marie. She's like, that was fast. Good morning, Ms. Marie.
I don't know if you are addressing the budget right now or a non-agenda public
We're going to
comment.
do the budget right after this your comments.
Okay, so anyways, so this is a non-agenda public comment, I guess?
Yes, it is.
I've submitted a request from North County. We're having communication problems, and I had a rental assistance voucher, and I am simply asking you, Greater San Diego, we are part of our Greater San Diego, whether or not, people are confused down there, up there, wherever that you regard that, to encourage them to reinstate my rental voucher, because I have actually received relief from the Superior Court for an incident on the apartment complex where we are working through management difficulties. That way, if I get the voucher, I'm not just running around the street. I can apply it to some of these San Diego locations, and I am qualified to receive it. And also, in terms of that, if you are able to help me, and my information's already been submitted to the office on the 3rd floor, my post box and everything. If you could send me just the voucher replacement, the record is with the Oceanside Carlsbad, so I do need help communicating. They would not allow me to have a informal hearing or anything according to HUD and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I just have not been able to get through to them.
Okay, Ms. Marie, I appreciate you being here today. Obviously, I know it takes a bit to get travel up down here from North County. I'm going to have Kelly work with you. Obviously, if there's anything we can do to try and aid you in your pursuit of a new voucher.
Yeah, probably through Oceanside. They seem to be the Section 8 location.
Okay, that's fair. So Kelly we'll have Kelly meet with you and then go from there, and appreciate you coming down today, and hopefully we can get you can get this worked out.
Great, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming down. Okay, thank you, Kelly. So we are now, that is the last of the non-agenda public comment items. We're going to go right into the vote on the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr.
We have a motion by Commissioner Cushman. Second by Commissioner Jackson. And I saw Vice Chair Clemmer stretching, so I was like, all right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no abstentions. That motion carries unanimously, and we will go right into the House Commission's proposed fiscal year 2027 budget, and we will take public comments after that. But I will turn this over to President and CEO Lisa Jones to introduce the item.
All right, good morning. The proposed budget that we're presenting to you today includes a few updates from what we presented during the board's workshop on April 16th, and we will highlight those revisions in today's presentation. However, the underlying uncertainty and fiscal challenges we are navigating remain. Shifting federal policy priorities and ongoing rising costs in our programs and operations contribute to fiscal constraints that we have to account for in our budget. We have spoken with this board, our council members, our community partners, and the public for more than a year now about the shifting policy priorities at the federal level, increasing costs in our programs and operations, and the fiscal challenges we are navigating. In this process, we continue to focus on achieving long-term fiscal stability so we can continue to support the thousands of families who rely on us and our remaining staff who serve these families and our community. However, the uncertainty we continue to experience includes our federal funding. Oops, this is not my updated one. Okay, we received our federal funding yesterday, our federal funding letter yesterday. We are still assessing it. From our initial review, it appears as though our projections were right about on target. So we do not anticipate seeing any significant changes in our budget as we take it forward to the Housing Authority in June. There remains ongoing uncertainty about state and local funding, as many public housing authorities across the country and government agencies at all levels experience similar challenges. As we shared with you last month, we made educated estimates to develop our proposed budget, and it looks like they're fairly right on. In the upcoming fiscal year, we still need to continue to deplete our reserves to cover our budgeted expenses. However, we've been proactive and made the tough decisions necessary to stabilize our budget and continue to serve our community. And we have developed a balanced budget that mitigates the amount we need from reserves and makes us more financially stable going forward. The steps we have taken to contain costs and, where possible, generate revenue are essential for this balanced budget. Now, our Chief Operating Officer, Azucena Valladolid, and our Vice President of Financial Services, Christelle Vanderwent, will present the proposed budget.
Good morning, Chair, Mitchell, and Commissioners. As we go through the proposed budget today, we will draw your attention to a few revisions to the budget from what we presented to you a few weeks ago. This morning, we will start with an overview of our proposed fiscal year 2027 budget. We'll also discuss the challenges we're navigating and the actions we've taken to balance our budget. And we'll highlight some key components as we discuss our objectives and deliverables. Next, we will go through the uses of funds in this budget and then conclude with anticipated revenues. We are proposing a budget of $688 million. That is $10 million more than the initial budget we presented to you in April. The $10 million change is due primarily to the inclusion of $6 million in city neighborhood enhancement fees that we will administer for affordable housing preservation, an increase in capital expenditures due to scheduled renovations budgeted in fiscal year 26 for our Home Key Pacific Village site that are now being rolled over into the fiscal year 2027, and changes to the Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing Voucher Funds, which Christelle will cover later in this presentation. Our proposed budget includes federal, state, and local funding sources. This budget also continues to advance our mission to foster social and economic stability by ensuring the development and preservation of quality, affordable housing solutions for San Diegans. This slide provides an overview of the fiscal challenges we are navigating, as we have shared in previous presentations. Our federal funding is not sufficient to support rental assistance for the families currently in our voucher programs. Our rental assistance costs also continue to rise. Our average housing assistance payment is now 84% higher than it was in fiscal year 2020. This has required us to use diminishing moving to work, or MTW, voucher reserves to achieve a balanced budget. Local reserves are also insufficient to meet all of the needs they have supported in the past. More of our local funds are needed to support our affordable housing properties. As we continue to draw on local reserves to meet property maintenance needs of our aging, affordable housing properties, we have less in local funds to support other agency activities like further our mission. These are the reasons why we have made the difficult decisions we have shared with you in the past few months. As you will see later in today's presentation, though the measures we have taken have slowed down our draw on reserves, we are still not yet able to attain basic minimum reserve levels in fiscal year 2027. Here you can see again many of the steps we have taken so far to contain costs and generate revenue. They include adjusting our rental assistance participants' family contribution amounts towards their housing. HUD recently approved those adjustments, and we have started notifying our families about the changes, which will take effect in October. These updates are necessary for us to prevent ending assistance for hundreds of voucher families. Instead, we will be able to continue to assist all families currently in our rental assistance program. Our recent reduction in workforce, the decision to not provide performance incentives or cost of living adjustments for senior leadership positions in the current fiscal year, and eliminating performance incentives for all staff in fiscal year 2027 are additional cost containment efforts. After years with minimal or no rent increases at our properties, we also must take the action of raising rents while staying within the limits of the California Tenant Protection Act. This will generate additional revenue while ensuring we maintain our units as quality, affordable housing for the families who rent from us. And we have raised our fees for land use activities. These changes realize cost savings that will mitigate our need to continue to draw down reserves in fiscal year 2027. Along with other initiatives in our strategic plan, these efforts will also create a more sustainable fiscal outlook for the future. This slide shows our budgets over the past 5 years. Budgets have been higher in recent years due to the new funding sources, such as the state's Home Key program, which launched in 2020. Cristal will now go over objectives, deliverables, and uses of funds.
For rental assistance programs, since our workshop last month, we've made one significant update related to our Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing VASH vouchers. Due to insufficient funding, we'll pause issuing new VASH vouchers. All current VASH participants will continue receiving rental assistance. No one will lose their current VASH assistance because of this change. Veterans currently being evaluated by the VA for eligibility will still be assisted if eligible. We'll also honor all existing project-based VASH commitments already in the development pipeline. This pause will better align projected program expenditures with anticipated federal revenues, reducing VASH housing assistance payment expenses by about $2.5 million. With this adjustment, in FY27, we'll invest more than $341 million to help approximately 17,000 households with low income through the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. We'll continue supporting emergency housing voucher families through November 2026, when federal funding for that program is expected to run out. These families will be prioritized for project-based voucher units for up to 1 year after their assistance ends. Our fiscal year 27 budget includes 191 new project-based voucher units. Finally, we'll continue supporting families through the SDHC Achievement Academy, which provides career planning, job readiness, financial education, and connection to community resources, especially as families prepare for the updated contribution amounts later this year. On the real estate side, the first-time homebuyer program budget has increased from $3.1 million to $3.4 million. This will fund assistance for up to 40 households in becoming first-time homebuyers. The budget now also includes approximately $6 million in city neighborhood enhancement fee funds that will administer for affordable housing preservation, subject to approval from the Housing Authority and City Council. As we discussed previously with the board, the proposed budget also commits up to $22 million in gap financing to developers to leverage with other funding sources to increase the affordable housing supply in our city. Including our nonprofit affiliate, the Housing Commission will continue to own or manage over 4,100 affordable rental housing units in fiscal year 27. And we've also budgeted $7.9 million to rehabilitate Housing Commission-owned units to support our ongoing commitment to provide quality, affordable housing. The total proposed homelessness budget is at $76.5 million, and it includes $53.3 million, or about 70%, of city-funded homelessness programs and $23.2 million, or 30%, of Housing Commission program funded by grants or local funds we administer. It is important to note that the homelessness budget you see today related to city-funded programs is the budget we submitted to the city. It will be adjusted as the city finalizes its budget. The proposed homelessness budget would also support ongoing operation for over 1,300 shelter beds and 87 transitional housing beds. This is the same as what we presented in April. City funding will also continue to support homelessness services programs, including the Housing Instability Prevention Program, the Eviction Prevention Program, the Homelessness System Coordination Services, and storage centers. We'll wrap up our presentation with a few slides about the proposed uses and sources of funds. The proposed budgeted spending for FY27 spending for FY27 amounts to $558 million. This consists of $359 million for rental assistance programs, $101 million for real estate, which includes $21 million for capital expenditure, $72 million for homelessness, and $26 million for operations support. Since the workshop, the budgeted personnel costs have increased. This is due to the addition of 13 positions for SDHC staff to provide direct property management services for several SDHC properties instead of continuing to use a contracted third party. This will result in overall cost saving, which I'll discuss further in the next slide. This increase is offset by a decrease in outsourced property management costs in the property expense line item. The housing program expenses have decreased by $2.5 million. This is a result of the reduction in voucher program expenses that we discussed earlier. Capital expenditure have increased by $2.6 million due to scheduled renovation budgeted in FY26 that are now being rolled over, including the related funding, into the next year. In fiscal year 27, we'll have a net decrease of 41 positions. This reflects the 58 eliminated positions discussed in the workshop. And those workforce reductions are offset by the addition of 3 positions for property management of the newly acquired Starling Drive property, a direct hire position to serve as our Wells Fargo-funded homeownership advisor, and the 13 additional positions mentioned on the previous slide for SDHC staff to manage more properties in-house, which result in cost saving of approximately $700,000. This aligns with our strategic plan initiative to reduce costs and strengthen property management services at the agency's permanent supportive housing sites. Next, we'll look at anticipated sources of funds. This table compares fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 26 funding sources across federal, local, and state categories. Key changes since the budget workshop include local funds, the addition of $6 million in city neighborhood enhancement fee funds for preservation, and the rollover of county renovation funds into FY27. These increases are offset by reclassifying $2.1 million for expanded homelessness prevention from city general fund bucket to the state homelessness, housing assistance, and prevention funds. Federal funds, we have budgeted an estimated $348 million from HUD and approximately $16.7 million in voucher reserve drawdown to cover our rental assistance expenses. Home fund increases reflect the timing of loan disbursement tied to project milestones. HomeKey Plus acquisition in FY26, $45 million was included in the budget for acquisition and rehab of our new HomeKey Plus property, which closed in March 2026. The FY27 budget includes $8 million to complete the rehabilitation. On the local real estate revenue side, there's expected to increase due to the scheduled rent adjustment at the Housing Commission affordable properties. On the state fund side, reduction primarily relate to the HomeKey Plus project and the timing of draws for multi-year infill infrastructure grant funding. Federal revenue continues to be the primary source of funding and accounts for 72% of new revenue, with MTW funds more specifically representing 64% of the budgeted new revenue for fiscal year 27. Please note, those are preliminary estimates. We have just received notification of our federal award for MTW voucher funds yesterday, which will be incorporating to the budget over the next week. The funding awarded is fairly in line with what was initially projected. Oh, back one. Thank you. Updates throughout the presentation, such as the preservation fund and changes to VASH utilization, resulted in a $10 million increase of our total fund balances, $6 million increase in program restricted fund, and the remainder in MTW reserves. Our $130 million fund balance includes $72 million of program restricted fund previously committed for NOFAs and affordable housing activities, and $58 million in reserve, including real estate, operating, debt service, and MTW HAP reserves. Last year, we adopted a new methodology for minimum operational reserve targets to ensure financial stability amid ongoing uncertainty in federal, state, and local funding. This includes minimum and target stabilization reserves based on industry best practices. Even with the modest increase in reserve level, the $58 million of reserve projected remains well below the minimum reserve target of $70 million and significantly lower than the recommended stabilization target reserve level. It is worth pointing out that the reserve levels that are most concerning continue to be the agency's voucher reserves. You can see the minimum reserve level should be about $28 million, which is the cost of 1 month's worth of housing assistance payments on behalf of our voucher families. When voucher reserves are so low, it is even more important to maintain at least minimum levels across the other reserves. Today, we are requesting that the board recommend that the Housing Authority take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on this slide.
Throughout the budget process and every day, we are committed to continuing to provide the housing assistance the families in our programs need and supporting our staff. With fiscal uncertainty and funding constraints we have discussed today and in the past year, We have made the difficult decisions that were necessary to achieve greater financial stability. We will still be navigating challenges in the coming fiscal year. As we have discussed, we will continue to use our reserves in fiscal year 2027 to assist families and serve our community. But the efforts we have undertaken provide us more fiscal stability and move us toward a stronger financial footing for the years to come. This concludes our presentation, and we are available for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. We do not have any speaker slips that have been submitted for this item, so commissioners, we will go right into comments, questions, and then hopefully get to a motion in a second. Vice Chair Klempner.
Thank you. As you mentioned, we've been talking about this for a while now, so I don't have a lot of substantive questions here. I appreciate you highlighting the changes since the last time we heard it. I think in general, one thing I think a lot about is the mismatch in our resources to the scale of the mission. And this agency, particularly over the last year, but going back a couple of years really, has done everything to right size and right prioritize, I think, and that has made has meant a lot of difficult decisions, but it has put those mission objectives at the top of our priorities. I feel pretty familiar, and like after 7-8 years or whatever now, I finally have kind of wrapped my head around the benefits and drawbacks of Section 8, of shelter beds, of our tax credit financing and construction, and the vouchers. It really seems like the problem, like they're a very efficient way to support people, but the problem is that when we don't have enough housing available in the band, the affordability band, for them to use those vouchers, then it just becomes a more and more expensive program that provides shallower and shallower assistance. And on the construction side, it is addressing that shortage, but it's very inefficient, takes a long time. It's all subject to the federal rules that we can't change. We're always talking about the price tag at the end. Those are programs that have been in existence at this point for 50 plus years and more or less unchanged, I think fair to say. So my question, and I'd like the two of you to answer, but then also Lisa and Casey and maybe Deborah. And and I'm going to give you all cover right now. I did not give anyone a heads up that I was going to ask this question.
That was evident by the looks on some faces.
Yeah.
Just wanted to do that.
No one should be held to their answer. I just want to hear your all thoughts on what I'm about to ask.
It's only being recorded, so don't worry.
I will come to your defense if anybody tries to take it out of context. If this agency had $100 million a year, not through HUD with all of its rules, not through the state with all of its rules, but if the agency had $100 million a year unrestricted and could supplement an existing program, create a new form of assistance, acquire housing, construct housing, whatever you want to do with it, given where this community is at today and the severe mismatch. I mean, let's be real, $100 million would still be just a dent. It would still be a dent, right? But if you had one more substantial dent that you could make in the challenges we're facing, what would you do with that $100 million? No wrong answers.
I know what Casey said.
Casey, go ahead. Casey, you seem eager to say it. Let's go, Casey. Go ahead.
I would invest it in permanent shallow subsidies for seniors and a segment of families as well, like folks with disabling conditions, or because the runway is really difficult for them. They're never going to catch up to market rate And they're always going to be severely rent burdened if they're on the lower income. So I think that would be a good investment because you're only investing the amount of resources they need to be able to live, not over subsidizing, right? You're like the 250, 500, whatever it is based on their unit. And you can serve a lot more people that way.
Do you think $100 million, like, is that a problem that resource is sort of proportionally in scale to kind of address?
Well, I mean, our $6 million investment, we served 479 households last year, but it's time limited. You need it, you know what I mean? It needs to be renewed annually, so it can't be like a one-time commitment. That's the thing, is shallow subsidy would need a permanent commitment. So I'd say over, you know, we wouldn't need $100 million in 1 year, but we would need to, yeah. Krishman understands what I'm saying.
that is a great
sense?
answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Casey. Any other answer? Casey or anyone else, if you have another idea?
Sort of to piggyback on what Casey said, I would probably invest in some flat subsidies. I do agree that our aging population is probably the most impacted, the most vulnerable because of sometimes limitations to increase earnings and things like that. But I would also invest in families with young children with the intention of trying to break the cycle for the next generation to then not need the necessity to rely on funds, hoping that the investment would allow people to live in areas of opportunity so that they can have greater access to resources, employment, education, right, things like that. I also believe that that would require an ongoing commitment, so I might be getting greedy here, to continue rental assistance for a period of time. But also the investment in mixed income properties for the same reason, as far as allowing low-income families to live with people in market rate units has also been shown to break cycles of poverty as well. So I would invest in mixed income household properties and flat subsidies for families.
I'm glad you mentioned the mixed income because you're right. At this point, there's just a mountain of research about the benefits across the board on basically every front to having mixed income development, and yet our whole system and structure is kind of built to not encourage mixed income. I mean, we try to encourage it, but it's like a constant challenge. Christelle, you got anything?
Yes, I'll come to this with more of a fiscal perspective. I would invest in the creation of affordable housing because we need more units, and we need affordable units where people need less to rely on subsidy and just have access to low rent units.
Can I press you on a follow-up on that? What would you do differently than how we currently invest in new construction?
Good question. I have to think about this one. I think the increase in funding would kind of...
And Colin didn't show up today, so there's literally no one for us to ask that question to other than you.
No, and I think what I wanted to add is that from the fiscal perspective, right, it'd be $100 million invested, but the rent income coming back, it's money that can be reinvested over time and continue to grow affordable housing.
So, like, the residual receipts loans
Yes.
would be the way that you'd recommend.
Yeah.
Deborah, I caught you off guard. It is a compliment that I just assumed you may have some wisdom to share on the question.
Well, I appreciate that, and you did catch me by surprise.
Again,
Sure.
Deborah, it was evident.
I didn't have my poker face. I'm coming from a perspective of what the ombudsperson hears from people. And lately what we've been hearing is people are in a financial crunch, a temporary financial crunch. They're in housing right now. And some big occurrence like a hospital bill or something has put them where they can't afford their rent for the month, and they just need a little bit of help to keep it going. And I don't want us to forget those people that are already stably housed, that some event happens that they're going to fall behind in their rent, and then that could turn into a whole cycle where they end up being evicted, and then they have a greater need. So I'm just coming from what we're hearing, and yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, I think we're hearing some themes here around, let's call it early intervention. Lisa?
Well, I'll say, I think what we're hearing is sustainability is really important. So if we had a $100 million annual bond that could bring funding into this community, it would be a game changer. And if we just did some really rough math, whether it was one-time resources or whether it was ongoing subsidy, like Casey talked about, one-time resources like Deborah and Azucena talked about, at $100 million annually with some very back-of-the-napkin math, you're serving anywhere between about 7,000 to 10,000 individuals or families, potentially households, 7,000 to 10,000 households a year. That is a big increase. I think what I hear from the team is that if we've got $100 million, we can tell you how to use it and we'll get it out there. So, right, so bring it. Like, if the money's there, we know how to program it. And I think, Christelle, too, you weren't just talking about gap financing, you were also talking about SDHC or HDP acquisition and then taking that net operating income and reinvesting it in gap financing or additional units or other programs. So that, too, I think was part of what you were talking about. But what I will say and what I'm very proud to say is that on the fly, thank you so much, Commissioner Cushman, Klumpner, Mr. C, anyway, sorry.
He has hair, I know.
Is that we know how to program that funding and we know how it will best serve our families. We have a lot of data analysis and a lot of smart people here, so thank you, team.
Thank you all. I think that was incredibly helpful. And, the one thing that I did not hear was anybody suggesting that we just plow more money into Section 8 with its, basic framework of how it defines who qualifies. And I didn't hear anybody suggesting that we plow money into a tax credit style construction program, like what is the backbone of the new construction right now. And I think that that's just a reflection of how those policies, how out of date they have become, how limited, while they are the biggest tools that we have, they are so limited on their ability to address the problems that we have in 2026, to adapt to the changing environment. They are just very rigid structures. And, when we're saying anybody below 80% AMI, in theory, should qualify for Section 8, that's just like a preposterous thing for us to kind of tell, and I don't mean us, but for the federal government, et cetera, to tell people, because 90-something% of those people will never see that. And so what you're all describing are more targeted programs that effectively address what perhaps Section 8 was meant to, perhaps in a different environment it could do, but the reality that just it does not do that right now. And the shallow subsidies, I think targeting the specific populations that have needs and have rising vulnerability makes a lot of sense. I think that the point about the residual receipts construction makes a lot of sense. You're right, that is self-perpetuating. It's something that we have very little of. I hope that, I've been to a few of the conferences. I think in public housing world, we're a little bit ossified and kind of stuck in the era that these programs were built in, which makes sense because all of you have very important jobs that relate directly to how we administer those programs, and the decisions I'm talking about are made far away from us. But I really appreciate and want to encourage long-term the creative thinking that you all, I think, do on a regular basis that I coaxed out of you by surprise, because I think that's really what we need. And it's a mistake for us to wait for the state, the federal government, et cetera, to come up with these solutions. We just have to sort of assume that that's not going to happen. And these types of ideas, I think, are what the public is craving, what policymakers are craving, which is some real, tangible insights into what we could do to make this a stronger community that has better protections for vulnerable people, has more upward mobility and opportunity. And we're going to have to come up with those ideas ourselves. And I think you're all very, very talented at that. And I hope that even if it feels like kind of a futile exercise, like I hope that you all continue to do that long term and to share those ideas with anybody that can help make those happen, because we do have a lot of control regionally. And over the next 10 years, we could make a big difference on these issues, but it's going to require that we have better ideas than the ones that we've kind of been stuck working with. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you indulging that exercise, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on the budget, and I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay. Mr. Cushman.
I think it was a fun exercise. The only thing I would say different than everybody else said is I divided into $30 million tranches over 3 years. We always want the immediate fix. Grab $100 million, we're going to spend it all this year. The problem is we never build sustainability. So if I was going to have your $100 million, I divide it by 3, then address my programs. Seniors, of course, getting them off the street. A third of our people are seniors, spot on. The diversion program, obviously, let's keep people where they are. And then figuring out how families don't end up in welfare for the rest of their lives. Because if the kids see that's all they see from mom and dad, and they don't change that, then they're going to be in poverty forever. So, really good point. I only have 2 points on the budget. Anytime I sit and listen to we're having to cut into reserves, I worry a lot. That's that is cutting into the bone.
I agree.
And we see it at many levels of our governments today, where we're cutting muscle. We're not just cutting. We're down to cutting muscle. And when I look at the reserve picture you showed, for the future, that obviously concerns me. The other thing that concerns me, $7.9 million for upkeep and continuing maintenance of our facilities. That's less than $2,000 a unit a year. That's pretty low budget when you realize the aging of our properties. So it's okay, but let's keep in mind that's not sustainable.
Well, so just to be clear on that, maintenance and
Excuse me, and I'll second the motion.
Thank you, sir. Maintenance and repairs on properties, that is a different that's in operations. Those are in operations costs. These are capital improvements. So it's sort of like building infrastructures, elevated surfaces, HVAC systems, plumbing systems that have to be replaced. And we have a physical needs assessment that gives us a 3-year timeline across our portfolio right now. This is one of those years. So,
But you're saying
so we're budgeting for that.
Actual cost that you believe you can keep that under $8 million?
It's going
don't
to
need a whole lot of HVACs in 4
it's going to depend on the year. Some years it's going to be higher, right? And it really depends on the work that we're scheduling for that year. So we have schedules that go out 3 years. But yes, we understand it's going to be an ongoing investment.
I just don't want us to get into a position where, because we've got a budget of $7.9 million and we have central plants or heat pumps or whatever it is going out, that our units become substandard.
Well, that is why having those reserves is so important, because if work that was not planned for occurs, we have those reserves. And we're essentially doing it ahead of schedule.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Because Commissioner Cushman just jogged my memory. This was the fund that we utilized during the flood aftermath, correct?
Well, during the floods, we actually used MTW dollars at the time because we had nearly $60 million in reserves a couple of years ago.
This was the long-term impact to the, I believe it was the capital improvements that we were I think when I asked.
We used
yeah.
we used to be able to use MTW for capital improvements. We can no longer, which means our local dollars that we generate through our properties that used to create all of our local funds to do some of our ancillary activities, more and more of that money has to
go
stay
back
with
into
the properties because we don't have MTW as a capital offset.
Did we ever get reimbursed for those emergency expenses?
Deborah is still working on it avidly, so I do get regular reports, but not yet, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, Commissioner Cushman, you're absolutely right that the long-term maintenance of these properties is such an easy thing for us, for everybody to kind of overlook especially when we're thinking year to year and emergencies, and it does get it. And I want to kind of point out, this is what gets tapped during emergencies when there's money that has to be spent that isn't budgeted, because this area is kind of one of the few things that there's not a next day impact to it. But it is crucially important for the reason that you stated, and I think that was all of our concerns at the time, was if that money was going out, it was going to have long-term effects, and if at all possible, it needed to come back. So I just want to kind of point that out. It is incredibly important, and I hope other agencies kind of, when they think about whether we can be asked to do stuff with those funds are very important. So
it's absolutely true, and that's why actually having that physical needs assessment across our entire portfolio is so important too. So we actually are planning for those systems, sort of essentially retiring out, right, and getting replaced. So you're right, we do not have the bandwidth that we had several years ago, and we won't for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and, I think after spending all these years with Mr. C, the two things I had marked down were the reserves and the concern about deferred maintenance. I think the deferred maintenance component is something that we hear about across the city, across the region. It's really easy to push things aside and say, we'll get to that later, and then later never happens until something disastrous happens. And so I think that I would end before the vote with my comments that this is about narrative, and I think Lisa just said something that was really important. She and I were having this conversation a couple of weeks ago. There was a time when an emergency would happen, the city would call, and miraculously, the commission would find the money to do it. Those days are over. And I think that's the most important thing for people to remember, is that those days are over. You can't just reach into the MTW work from a fiscal standpoint and a staffing standpoint and just do it. And so the narrative that we have to make sure everybody understands is that those days are over. But more importantly, I think that this what stood out on the slide was the 41 position reductions at a time, as Vice Chair said, when we know there's going to be a surge in need. The reductions. It's not. I don't want anybody listening to this hearing or watching this hearing to think, oh, they'll just absorb it. That's not the case. Every time Casey gets up and talks about the placement percentages, I saw an article in the Union Tribune last meeting. The Vice Chair and I were talking about this. The article didn't make the point that it was talking about how things are going well. Well, when you listen to the placement numbers, you can't listen to 8% placement as defined as where everything's going well. And we know that number is going to continue to rise. And I think, again, when it's about narrative, what I think the Vice Chair and I talked about, and Lisa, is that this is the time where we have to actually not just look at this and go, okay, I agree that 6.9 million variance on reserves bothers me. We have to come up with our own plan. I think the Vice Chair was saying this, that what we used to depend on, we can't fall for that anymore. I do think it's important that this organization, this agency, and the team here, and Lisa's heard me say this, we have to create, I think, the view, and this ties a little bit in with what Mr. C said, a 5-year plan that is around certain components. You're right, you can break this into tranches, 30, 30, and 30. And what we have to do really well over the course of the next 3 to 5 years is we have to make the narrative clear. I think the shallow subsidies discussion, really important. Mr. C and I have talked about this for many years about what happens in the spiral. First of all, we may see an economic slowdown, hours get cut. When hours get cut, the affordability crisis sets in. And the little things, when we were starting a diaper bank at the food bank, people were like, why do you need a diaper bank? Because when the crunch happens, people that have young kids need diapers. The focus on families and the increasing number of families that are requesting space is something that we can't overlook. We need to really take a hard look at how we're going to address that situation as it continues to rise. And, you know, you hear me say this at all the meetings, you know, I'm not worried about feeding people. We will work with the food bank to feed our own customers and clients in the 4,100 units that we have to make sure that they are not going without. But I think it's got to be broader and bigger than that. And I think the shallow subsidies conversation, great to hear that the $6 million helped 479 families. When the letter came in from HUD says, hey, your emergency voucher program is going away, all I could think about was, how are we going to help them? What are we going to do? The flat subsidies comment was a good one. The needs bucket. Realistically, that's what we have to build. We have to rebuild a needs bucket. And this plan that we have to develop has to be a community support plan. When the floods happened, I was really happy and surprised at the companies that stepped up and provided support, you know, the Qualcomms and the Verizons, because they saw the need. I think what we have to now develop is a narrative that defines that need for the next 3 to 5 years and ask for help. And it can't be from the federal government. Unfortunately, that is just not going to happen. And I think the city is going to struggle. And what we have to do as an organization is depend on the incredible team here to create that view that we want people, that narrative that we want people to understand, and then support, because it's not going to get easier. And you know, I love data. I love the collection of data and understanding more about where we are. But we have to use that data then aggressively as part of the narrative. People are going to cringe when I say this, but at some point, you know, LA did this. They passed a ballot measure, which they have not necessarily spent well. But I do think if we were to do the same thing here, and we have the right narrative around what our needs are and what we'd like to build, it may be something we have to discuss in 3 to 4 years, right? I mean, I don't think you can pass anything right now because we have to define the situation and build that narrative. But I do think at some point, long term, homelessness is never going to be eradicated. We have to try and do is build a system where we can be responsive when there's a surge and there's a problem, or just on any given day when somebody comes in for help, so that you can start to address this placement issue. I will end with this. You know, some of the narrative, and I still get upset when I hear people talk about the homelessness crisis. It's not polling in the top 2 or 3 anymore. So people are like, well, see, it's not a problem. Wrong. Cost of living is number 1. And what's attached to cost of living? Housing and homelessness, a roof over your head. And so what we have to do is not let people forget that homelessness is still a major problem and will get worse because the cost of living activities and actions that are happening across the space of government aren't helping. We have to be that helpful unit that creates the right narrative and then generates the right support. And so, you know, this, you know, Lisa's heard me say this. We have to speak as one voice for this population of people. Mr. C, you've always mentioned this to me. There are people that we're going to help who may not ever remember our names, but they will remember that we were there to give them support and guidance when they needed it. That's what's most important. I could care less. So, with that, we have a motion and a second. I don't see any further comments on the budget. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions. The motion carries and passes. Thank you very much for that presentation. Okay, we will now move on to the next action items. We had one non-agenda public comment. We passed that. Did we vote on the non-agenda public? We did vote on the.
Voted on the consent.
On the consent agenda, we did. All right, so we'll now go to the report from our President and CEO, Lisa Jones.
Sorry, Chair Mitchell, can we vote on the approval of minutes?
Oh, that's right. That's what I was forgetting. I knew I was forgetting something.
Thank you.
Look at Susie. She's like, God, I got to help this guy every single time. All right, so we have the.
Sorry, Walter's got some.
We're going to have to table that until next meeting because we don't have a quorum anymore.
We don't.
Because is Mr. Seeley, did you ask him to come back and just vote real quick? He shouldn't even be on the elevator yet. Okay, Walter, if he comes back for a quick vote, we'll take a quick motion and the minutes should be pretty simple. He's already gone?
All right.
Okay, we'll do it in the next meeting. All right, Lisa, the floor is yours.
All right, I have a few updates to share this morning. There we go. Next slide, perfect. About a month ago, we started to formally notify families in our rental assistance and public housing programs about changes we are implementing later this year. As you recall, the board approved late last year some changes to how we calculate the family contribution amounts for our households to ensure that everybody could remain stably housed and we could still afford to support everybody on our programs that are on our programs today. We also started notifying families.
All right, we're going to take a quick motion. I just sent you a text, Mr. C. It's kind of funny. See? That's just how connected we are. Right, all right. So we will go ahead and entertain a motion and a second on the approval of the minutes. We have a motion by Vice Chair Klumner. Second by, look, we'll give it to him since he came back from Mr. Cushman. Any further comments, questions on the minutes or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for coming back for that motion. Okay, thank you. All right, thanks. That's how we do things here.
All right.
Lisa, go.
I had mentioned that we recently received our approval from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for the updates on how we calculate the amounts that families contribute toward their housing in these programs. We started providing information and public noticing to the families as early as last October, have continued to talk publicly and meet with community-based organizations and advocacy groups around this work, getting information out. I will say that just for members of the public, I know our board knows this, but for members of the public who are watching today's meeting, our program participants pay a portion of their income towards their housing, and this is known as their family contribution. The Housing Commission pays the difference between that family contribution amount and the total due to the landlord up to the payment standard for the rental home. However, we have found it necessary to increase these family contribution amounts because our federal funding is not meeting the rental assistance needs of all the families we currently serve. If we did not implement these updates, hundreds of families could lose their rental assistance entirely, and our goal is to make sure that people continue with assistance and stay housed. By making these changes, we expect to be able to continue to assist all the families in our rental assistance and public housing programs. With these updates, our elderly disabled households will pay 32% of their income toward their rental housing, and we will continue to not have any required minimum family contribution for elderly disabled households. The family contribution amount for households that are work able will either be 40% of their income or a minimum family contribution amount. The minimum family contribution amounts are based on the household size and the current minimum wage of $17.75 per hour in the city of San Diego. That minimum contribution amounts are based on the household size. For instance, a household with one work-able adult would be calculated at one work-able adult working 25 hours a week at minimum wage. The minimum family contribution for a family with one work-able adult will be $580 per month. A family with two work-able adults would have a minimum family contribution of $11.55 per month, and a family with three or more work-able adults would have a minimum family contribution of $17.35 per month. We have sent correspondence and letters to the affected families through the U.S. mail and through email, and we will continue to send additional notices before the new family contribution amounts take effect on October 1st of this year. We have also provided information through frequently asked questions and explanatory videos on our website. These resources are available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Our staff are committed to working alongside our families during this process, answering their questions, offering guidance, and helping them prepare with confidence for these changes, making sure that they are accessing the resources that they need to be successful. Next slide. Our goal is to ensure that all families we currently serve remain stably housed. We have dedicated a webpage on our website with a list of many community resources available for our families. We have worked with our community-based organizations to make sure that that website is robust and updated regularly. Our notices about the updated family contribution also include information about these community resources available to them and our SDHC Achievement Academy. Our Achievement Academy helps families confirm their eligibility for other government benefits and collaborates with community partners to develop job skills and career plans. In addition to the resources provided by our Achievement Academy, we are collaborating with community partners to host resource fairs for affected families, and I will provide additional details regarding the specific dates and locations as these become available. We will also offer time-limited hardship assistance for eligible families when the new family contribution amounts are implemented. Details about how to request this support will be included in each household's family contribution letter. We know families we serve may reach out to our community-based organizations and policymakers for help with resources as well. So we are also working with council offices and our state and federal representatives' local offices and have shared information and links to resources with them to assist families who may reach out to them with questions. And we have updated the members of our community-based organization advisory group about these changes and the resources available to assisted families as well. One of the reasons we had to revise the family contribution calculation in our rental assistance and public housing programs is ongoing uncertainty about our federal funding, which already has been insufficient for those programs. As you heard in our budget presentation this morning, we only recently received our funding letter from HUD, but we have our initial assessment says that the funding is coming in about as we projected, so we do not anticipate seeing any significant changes. As insufficient funding continues, it is important for us to have opportunities to connect directly with federal lawmakers to share our priorities and how the lack of sufficient federal funding affects the families we serve in our community. We were able to join City Council members and the Mayor at the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce's mission to Washington, D.C. on April 27th and 28th. On this trip, we met with Representatives Sarah Jacobs and Mike Levin and the Chief of Staff of Representative Scott Peters. We also had good conversations with Council President Joe LaCava, Council President Pro Tem Kent Lee, and Council members Vivian Moreno and Stephen Whitburn. At our meetings in Washington, we discussed housing affordability, federal rental assistance, homelessness, and how federal resources are essential to assisting the families in our community, and what the impacts are when that funding is insufficient. I also moderated a conversation with National Family Housing Council President Sharon Wilson Gino. We thank the Chamber for organizing this important mission to Washington, D.C. and creating the opportunity to advocate with our lawmakers. State resources are also crucial to the housing and homelessness programs we administer. A couple of weeks before the Washington trip, we joined People Assisting the Homeless or PATH and Council President Joe LaCava on a trip to Sacramento to meet with state lawmakers. We had the opportunity to connect with State Senate Pro Tempore Monique Lyman's staff, the Governor's Deputy Legislative Secretary Milas White, Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel's staff, and consultants for the state's Senate Budget Subcommittee and Senate Housing Committee. In our meetings, we talked about the state's homeless housing assistance and prevention, or HAP funding, and how potential cuts to homelessness services and programs can impact our community. You'll recall that the state did not include any HAP funding in the current state budget and proposed half of that amount from previous years for the coming fiscal year. We have advocated for more HAP funding from the state, and we will continue to because it is a crucial source of funds for the homeless programs we administer. We are also continuing to create affordable housing opportunities in our community for families that need them. We have to remember in these challenging times to also celebrate our successes. Yesterday, our Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development, Colin Miller, joined Mayor Todd Gloria, developer Community Housing Works, and additional partners for the grand opening of Jacaranda on 9th. This development provides 87 new affordable rental apartments in the Cortez Hill neighborhood. They will remain affordable for 55 years for households with extremely low income. 14 of these units are for people who've previously experienced homelessness, and we awarded rental housing vouchers to help the residents pay for their housing at Jacaranda. We also support the development with financing through a loan and multifamily housing revenue bonds, which this board and city council approved. The grand opening of another new development on April 16th celebrated the addition of 72 affordable rental apartments in City Heights for families with low income. I was able to join Councilmember Elo Rivera, the mayor, the developer Wakeland Housing and Development Corporation, and Price Philanthropies Foundation for the opening of the Terralta. The Housing Commission awarded 33 rental housing vouchers to this development to help families with extremely low income pay for their housing at that site. The Terralta was built specifically to provide 3- and 4-bedroom apartments for larger families. I can't say how important that is. Having sites that actually support larger families is a huge need in our community, and Wakeland did a terrific job really building a site that fits well into the community and enhances the whole area of that main drive. With rents that they can afford, these families will have a much greater opportunity to devote more of their time and their limited resources to school health and to spending time with each other and building community. Finally, we celebrated the groundbreaking for a new development that, when it is completed, will provide 59 rental housing homes. Serra Mesa Apartments will transform a former City of San Diego library site into affordable housing, a great new use for that site. About half of the rental homes are for veterans who previously experienced homelessness, and we awarded 30 Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing vouchers to that project and for those veterans. Our Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development, Colin Miller, joined the Mayor, Community Housing Works, and additional partners for this groundbreaking on April 14th. That concludes my report this morning. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Lisa. I thought there was only one thing I'd say about your comments when you said with ongoing uncertainty about federal funding. I'm certain that we're not going to have any certainty about federal funding, so.
That's twice you've corrected me on
Yes, I would just say that I'm certainty of uncertain. Okay, there are no speaker slips that have been submitted on your public comment on anything else. So I think, Lisa, we don't have any additional comments from the commissioners? Casey, I was going to get to that part because I knew we weren't going to let it. Yeah. So, Casey, you can come to the mic now.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to provide an update on the Coordinated Shelter Intake Program. So in the month of April, we received 2,947 referrals for shelter, which we were able to accommodate 287 for a 10% completion rate. No change here, but the incomplete referrals were due to 50% not having enough male beds, 25% for not having enough female beds, and 6% for families. Let me see. The completion rate in April increased compared to prior months from 8% to 10% in March, and that was due to a special outreach event that we conducted in East Village with the city. So we set aside beds and were able to complete them, so that impacted that. So fiscal year to date, we've received 28,526 referrals, of which 2,410 have been able to be completed for an 8% completion rate. The trends match. 50% were not completed due to having enough male beds, 25% for female, and 9% were due for safe sleeping. I wasn't expecting that. As we've said previously, we're starting to track unique households, which is really, really critical. So in April, those 2,947 referrals constituted or were made up of 1,080 unique individuals asking for shelter. This is a 4% increase in unique individuals from the month before and 30% since the start of the fiscal year. As I stated earlier, CSIP has received 28,526 referrals this year. That is 6,055 unique households that have requested shelter. Sorry, there's a lot of... Okay, sorry, on to the next thing. So 21% or 2,296 referrals. Sorry, I can't read. What am I trying to say? I know, it's a lot. It's a lot of numbers. So, okay, so 2,296 households, or 38% of the unique households were referred one time for shelter. Here we go. And then 2,999 households, or 49%, were referred 2 to 9 times. And the balance, or 13%, were referred 10 or more times to shelter.
Quick question, when you say unique households, can you be exact, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so unique individuals, so, or if it's a family, it would just count.
First time coming in?
The head of household, not necessarily the
well,
the first
if
time.
They
could request multiple times within a month or consecutive months, but we just track by how many.
But that wouldn't be unique though, then, if they ask every Friday, you count them
just once.
One time.
Yes.
That's what.
Right. Yeah. So you might have 2,600 referrals, and in a month, and that came from 900 individuals.
Right. Like this month, it was 1,081.
I think that funny. I made a note on this, Casey.
Mm-hmm.
I'd literally written it down. One of the things that we have to chart better is, because I think this goes back to the narrative, mm-hmm. is the unique number,
yes.
right? Because I think that will be more of a barometer of what's happening. Mm-hmm. Is we at the food bank, we will say that if the University Avenue distribution goes from normally 600 people, and all of a sudden, in the month of June, it goes to 1,000 people, then you take the additional 400 people, go, okay, they're unique starting now, but they may continue on for the rest of the year. We wouldn't count them again, but we'd say, boy, we had 400 new additions to the line.
So I want to be clear on what we do and don't count when we're doing this. So we're not looking at newly homeless for the first time.
No.
So when we get referrals for shelter, we don't go into the level of detail that you'd go into to enter someone into HMIS. That's a lot more detail. The more detail you ask, the less likely they are to engage and ask for shelter. So we ask very basic questions, and it's really been through a lot of both automated and manual assessment that you now have to do every month just to count the unique individuals out of that 2,600 referrals.
But Lisa,
so that's
question,
a huge change.
That is a huge change, but I guess I'm confused. If Ryan and I show up on a Thursday and say, hey, we need housing, we've never asked before, you're going to know that that's our first time asking, or are you not?
Not for shelter. The shelter intake conversation is a very basic.
I see what you're saying. You're dividing shelter versus a request for permanent housing.
So this is just requests for shelter.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It's a separate, it's a database that we've created that's outside of HMIS.
that's fair.
We do some analysis, but it's not, we're not fully integrated into HMIS to do that
and
level of analysis.
The more we ask, oftentimes the higher barrier the ask becomes, and the less likely people are to engage. So that's why it's very limited.
I mean, we continue to refine. I mean, this data is only possible because of the work Jonathan and his team have done since July to refine the system to capture better data. But we are still looking at like the gender breakdown, the TAY versus seniors versus to try to get an understanding of what kind of beds are we missing, right?
I think that as this gets more complicated, one of the things that I would put out an all call to all of my colleagues who are looking for something to fund is, would you be able to use an additional, like an intern that came in for 30 hours a week to help you track this information so that we are collecting the data, but I don't know.
I think there's the question about what the assessment that the staff is doing versus the engagement that's happening during outreach in the field, right? So it's
trying to divide the two.
Yeah, so we'd have to look at probably a conversation about, is there more we want to ask at outreach that doesn't just become onerous for the client?
Nothing to stop
versus is there more assessment that needs to be done? So
there's that, and then also analyzing or cross-referencing it with HMIS to pull out what additional data we can get from that.
All right.
We're never going to say more to more staff to help.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at, again, as we say, we have to create our own solutions. The data and the analysis and the collection, making it easier for you, because I think the more clarity we provide on what's happening here on the ground, go back to what I said. Ryan does polling all the time. 3 years ago, every poll we did, homelessness was number one, right? Now, cost of living is number one, but people aren't tying it to homelessness. The data matters. So, okay. All right. Because I know sometimes when we're talking about everything we'd like to do up here,
sometimes, I'm just going to say this, sometimes staff will hear it as like, why aren't you doing more? And I cannot tell you the number of hours staff has spent to get us to this point, which is so much more sophisticated than is, to the best of our knowledge, any other region in the country. Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge and thank the staff for all the work they've done. Yeah. We are always looking at how we can improve data, and I know you are too. And I know a lot of this is to try to better understand what the need is out there so that we're not just funding shelter willy-nilly, we're funding to the need, and that is incredibly valuable. So,
I wasn't, Casey, I was being critical. I was saying, can I get you some additional help?
Casey, I'm just thinking the staff that are grinding away in the back.
I'm like, Lisa, was I being critical? I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be critical. I was like, hey, how can we help you? That's what I was trying to say.
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to make sure they heard that. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Fair enough.
And just to make doubly sure, I mean, the data that we have on this is just night and day from where it was even 5 years ago. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Seeing no further items on the agenda, and we've taken all the votes we need to take, I am going to say that this concludes today's meeting of the Board of Commissioners. We are officially adjourned at 10:19 a.m. on Friday, May 8th. Everybody have a good rest of the afternoon, stay safe, and thank you for everything you're doing.